Hello and welcome back to the channel. John Flutter here from Myofunctional Orthodontic Training. I want to, with this short video, continue the discussion I'm having about the claims that Dr. Michael Mew makes in both his patients' treatment plans and on his website that the British Orthodontic Society feel are both misleading and inaccurate. And I want to continue looking at what we feel the difference is about cranial growth and development, in particular how and where the maxilla grows to. And I'm going to use the standard textbook that's used throughout the orthodontic speciality, Enlow's textbook about growth and development. And he describes displacement and remodeling. And displacement is the movement of the maxilla and its downward and forward process, whereas remodeling is the osteoblasts and the osteoclasts actually changing the shape of the bone as it moves. And that downward and forward movement occurs because we get the growth and development at the back, as I'll change the picture around to make that clearer. And we can see that that is both displacement, downwards and forwards, and remodeling, ending up with the shape that the maxillary arch is, the two maxillae are. And the mandible grows downwards and forwards under much the same process. There is both displacement downwards and forwards and remodeling as the shape of the mandible changes, as this osteoclastic activity on the anterior margin of the ramus of the mandible and osteoblastic activity on the posterior ramus of the mandible. And so what Enlow goes on to say is that these two processes, although that is the fundamental process of growth and development of the facial growth, is really totally disregarded when trying to account for how a given appliance or clinical procedure is presumed to work. And I think that's really important when it comes to trying to provide evidence to support the claims that Dr. Mew makes. And when we're talking about what the control theories are, and it's not like this one idea, Enlow discusses the theories that do discuss cranial growth, and he talks about genetic blueprint, and then further on talks about biomechanical forces. And what he says about genetics is that we rely too much on giving a genetic explanation, and it's really a subject and topic that we, the specialists, do not fully understand. But without going into the detail of epigenetics, that might be a subject of another video. Most children have the genetic potential to grow perfectly developed bones with well-aligned teeth. Whether they do or do not is often referred to as whether the genes are turned on or turned off to do particular functions. That's the epigenetics. Some genes can be turned on and some genes can be turned off, and that can change actually in some treatment plans, but I don't want to get too much into that. But what it does say is that these signals that turn genes on and off is as a result of messages that are received. So these signals, the cells pick up messages and can turn genes on and off to do particular functions. So when we're talking about whether it's genetic or biomechanical forces, which is another theory about craniofacial growth, what most frontline researchers discount is the notion of a master growth center. The idea that there is one center that's controlling growth and development. Rather, they're looking at there being regional areas, and each region has got local feedback mechanisms to control the growth and development of that particular part of the body, which is why, however misshapen the maxilla might be, it always will exactly match the surrounding bones. They all grow and develop to match themselves. But he goes on to say that there's no doubt whatsoever that mechanical forces represent one of the many of these messengers involving signals, these epigenetic signals that activate osteogenic connective tissue. What regulates the complex balance of these gene activities among all the multitude of cells and tissue participants is the key issue, and we can't deny that. But what he goes on to say, that anybody who tries to prove or disprove any of these theories, whether it's the functional matrix or the tropic premise, is that all of the factors that Enloe describes in his textbooks, and he describes 4 factors that will have an influence on this growth and development. He says these factors, this is my highlighting, and these actually inseparability of these factors as independent controllable experimental variables means that any attempt at random control studies will be doomed to failure, because you cannot differentiate between the different factors. Is muscle important? Is tongue position important? Does the tongue give genic activity to particular muscles, to particular osteoblasts to get them to grow? There's so many different factors to do a double or blind trial. It is unrealistic. But it does suggest that muscle is influential on bone development, which does rather suggest that the tongue develops the space it requires, rather than the idea that the tongue occupies any space that has been developed. And he also goes on to relate how the airway relates how to whole body and lung development. So what I'm trying to say in this short video is, when we're talking about growth and development, is that there's 2 things happening here. There's displacement and remodeling, and the cephalometrics acknowledging what's happening with the remodeling. The cephalometrics make that really clear. What they don't acknowledge is what's happened in the displacement. And what we're saying is that the tongue affects the displacement as well as the remodeling of the bone, which is totally disregarded. And that's what I've tried to discuss in this video. In the next video, I want to go on to looking at that, at the tongue space and the nasal airway, and how that affects body posture, and how maybe the growth of the nasal airway affects the entire body and the breathing system. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, as I say, give us a thumbs up, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video next time.